He's been an active part of various NGOs and corporate and youth events. He has also served as a legal advisor to Urbz. And today he's here to talk about his lived experiences and observations from Dharavi Koyawada. We've also been joined by Stalin D, who is widely referred to as the warrior of the wetlands, and rightfully so. Stalin is an environmentalist affiliated to Mumbai based NGO One Shakti. To date, he's filed over 25 public interest litigations to save the environment, forest, rivers, and wetlands. He continues to dedicate endless hours to protect the environment and has successfully saved several wetlands, forests, and environmentally sensitive zones from getting wiped out. He's committed towards making Mumbai a responsible city that manages and handles its own waste in a very environmentally friendly manner. He is also currently ensuring that all mangroves are brought under the protection of the Forest Department. And finally, we are joined by Samidha Patil. Samidha is an architect and urbanist. She's also a partner at the Urbz Collective. She specializes in urban housing, equity, and social justice. Samidha was born and brought up between the Mahim and the Varli Koriwada. She now works in Dharavi Koriwada as an architect. She works with local contractors of Dharavi to co-design homes and chawls for the inhabitants of the neighborhood. And she brings in the element of participation in all projects, especially to develop a community-centric design. Today, she will be talking about the relationship between infrastructure and local development. So I would just like to welcome all of you here, and I'm glad that you all have agreed to take time off and do this. So all the people who are watching us, you're welcome to put any questions in the chat box. We will be addressing them at the end of this session if we have time. And of course, the panelists are welcome to reply to them directly via chat. We also have a Marathi to English interpretation channel, just in case any of the panelists are going to be speaking in Marathi. So anybody who needs that translation can choose I think they can choose the Marathi channel and they will be able to understand the translation. Also, the structure of the panel today is that we will be discussing on the basis of 3 prompts. Each panelist will have about 3 to 4 minutes to put their thoughts forward. The premise of today's discussion is that the climate crisis, while being a global issue, has real-time impacts on inhabitants of specific communities. These are often vulnerable communities. And however, the global discussions around climate change are still centered around the larger picture. We find that often the narratives of environmental degradation and restoration are far removed from the tacticality of the human-nature interaction. Many inhabitants of drowning cities, villages, small island nations all across the world who are being directly impacted by the climate crisis as we speak already possess generational knowledge of their environments using which they've already started adapting to situations to the best of their ability. In many places, these communities are already taking measures based on this collective intelligence without much institutional support. And through this session, we want to discuss adaptation and resilience in the local setting through context-driven strategies and techniques and the possibility of scaling them. So without spending more time, I would start with the first prompt, which is, what do you think is one major local manifestation of the climate crisis in the geographical context of your work or live space? And maybe I think we can start with Stalin and move on to Vikas, and then Larson, Ganesh, and then Samidha.
Thank you for inviting me for this program. When you talk of the impact on the local communities, what we cannot ignore is that rising temperatures are going to cause or are already causing a shift in the agricultural patterns. The cropping is affected. Water crisis is looming large on us. Areas which had good rainfall are not seeing rainfall. Those who didn't have rainfall are seeing extra heavy rainfall. So the food crisis is going to get worse. And the importance of your natural climate resilient infrastructure has to be taken very seriously, and it has to be protected. Now, when you talk of, let's say there's more warming, when the seas get warmer, you find that the coastal areas are getting more and more populated with what you call mangroves because of the urban discharge of fresh water into these areas. I mean, sewage water or whatever. But when you talk of a larger part of it, when you see that when there are too many mangroves, again, that is not good news for the communities. When the mangroves start proliferating because of the excessive sewage we discharge, then though they are good in terms of climate change, but if you see locally, it affects the fishermen's access to the waterfronts, their fishing areas, etc. are taken away. That is one part. Like I said earlier, the area of concern is the loss of wetlands, because wetlands again are crucial for ensuring that mankind has enough water on this planet. So when we talk of my areas of work, I would say wetlands and mangroves would be the focus, because they impact communities directly, both in terms of water and in terms of livelihood.
That makes sense. Ganesh, Vikas, do you want to add to this?
Oh, yeah. Actually, if you see in terms of what Stalin said, I just want to, take that idea to the next level. So, fishermen, because of this infrastructure development, a lot of development happening around the coastal area. So, the local species of, the fishermen used to eat or they used to sell, quickly they used to go to the nearest area to catch for a day or so. Okay. So, those catches are getting affected. Now, I just want to, talk about some certain things that how this everything is government is aware that last year 2021, Mr. Chahal, Commissioner of Mumbai, Bombay Municipal Corporation, he has said that by 2050. 80% of the ABCD ward, that is like Princess Street, Marine Lines, and those areas, will be either getting submerged or the water will be flooded. And they have immediately this year 2022 they have made a climate action plan or a climate change plan where they have talked about net zero effect by 2050, which is we as a fisherman or we as a people from the Bombay, we welcome those thoughts. But at the other hand, if you see the intergovernmental panel for climate change, if you read their report, this is sixth assessment, they are talking about the coastal road is a maladaptive project. Okay, they have mentioned it there that is it's a maladaptive. Now in the climate change plan of 2022 of BMC, they are not talking anything about this maladaptive, because intergovernmental panel said that fishery and biodiversity is getting tossed. Everything will the fishermen will not able to fish around that area. It has been mentioned in the docket, but Coastal Road Authority or BMC, which is BMC basically, they are not talking about anything on the change plan in that particular docket. So intergovernmental panel of climate change is saying something which is more important for the fishermen and the coastal areas, wherein these people who are talking about the submerged and flooded areas. And the biodiversity is getting tossed, and fishermen, their fishery can get lost. So they are they are not concerned about this. So I think we as a fishermen, if we get a chance to develop something, like we are coming up with our ideas, one ideas which we wanted to talk about this last time. I spoke about one of activity which is women's generally drain their sanitary pads to the
Right.
their commodes. So something like this directly goes to the sea, which Stalin also saying that because of this, all the stuff which goes to the sea directly without treating it, the waters and the sewage. So I think that needs to be seen properly.
Right. So, related to this, Ganesh, do you think there are, as somebody who actually goes into the sea almost every day, what are your observations about the climate crisis? What are the manifestations of it, rather, instead of just talking about it as climate change and the crisis? What do you observe every day? You're on mute.
First of all, very good afternoon or good evening for a few guys. And thanks, Anushka, for bringing me to this discussion. As Stalin also said a while ago, the part of mangrove, uh, getting more mangrove is also a problem, but lesser mangrove is also a problem. But if you go like not more than 4 decades back, the entire fisheries in Maharashtra, particularly Ahmedabad and Mumbai, 70% of the entire catch uh, that time was caught in and around Mumbai. But whereas right now only 5% of the catches are now in and around Mumbai. So that is a big change what we saw, mm, only in like 3 decades. If you name the species like prawns, Bombay duck, or any local species which are directly related to the mangroves, or even the certain climatic conditions, what Stalin also mentioned about the rise in sea temperatures, changes in currents, it's actually happening. And nobody is actually noticing that some species which were easily available on our coast or in our creeks are actually started migrating to newer places. So that means slowly and slowly, what we talk about in Mumbai, there were around 250 fishing villages actively fishing in and around creeks and in the 5 kilometer radius of the coastline. There are no more fishing because there is no more fish. Just to give a small context, also in a lockdown, when entire Bombay was a lockdown for more than 6 months, some creeks actually started showing a healthy signs. There were species coming back to the creeks. So these are all small things which, at a regulation level, at the authority level, when they are designing the policies for the local fishermen, they have to understand these small practices wherein a direct impact is happening to the community, wherein because it is simple. If the livelihood stays, the community stays, the fishing village stays. If there is no fishing, there is no village. There is it's a simple. So I think instead of putting policies which says we have to increase our production, increase our catch, it has to be a sustainable kind of a policy wherein you keep the community engaged in what they are doing right now, for coming generations also. If there is if it always talks about increasing the production and increasing the catch at a cost of the environment and the everything, it's not going to happen. So just like what Vikas also said, there might be a pilot project in Warsaw, there might be a pilot project in Mumbai. There has to be a small pilot projects created geography wise so that the occupation sustains. So
Right.
yeah.
Very interesting, and then maybe we can discuss this later in the discussion.
Yeah.
Larson, do you have any things that you could add?
Thank you for having me here. I would like to address the issue of climatic crisis pertaining to the ponds, basically. Ponds, in Koli language, we call it agar. That is in the Viti River, which is surrounded around the Dharavi Koliwada, the entire stretch of Dharavi Koliwada. So what has happened? I'll just go to the history, brief history. So in the year 1970s and 80s, there was a project of Sine Bandra link road. So because of that, there was a displacement, and that was a large-scale displacement, which has cost a lot for the daily activities of fishing to the local Koli people, to the local Koli folks. And to tell you that ponds in the Mithi River were once upon a time a lifeline for these Koli people. But uh, nowadays, some people are there who are practicing, who are there, who goes to the ponds to do the fishing activities, but they are not totally dependent on, because in previous generation, if you see, they were totally dependent on the fishing from these ponds, from these local fishes like crabs and etc. So what has happened is, due to this displacement, the natural flow of water, which has been uh, devastated tremendously, and these extreme weather conditions and unusual seasons are the real factors which have uh, hampered the aquaculture production, which was there. Uh, the aquaculture production, which was there a few decades back, is not now. So these all things has really hampered, and these aquatic plants and fishes have become the victim of this climate crisis. And just to tell you, once upon a time, as my father says, there was crystal clear water which from where one could see the pebbles and the rocks and like local fishes clearly. But it is not so right now because of the pollution and debris which have been dampened up in the Miti River.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so. I feel that this is also very like connected to infrastructural changes that have happened in overdevelopment. Samada, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes. Yes.
Climate crisis and infrastructure and those point of view.
Yeah,
What
thank you, Anushka, and thank you all the panelists. So definitely, like the climate crisis that we talk about, especially in the context of Mumbai, we can't take away the fact that large scale urbanization that happened in the city, and this urbanization I'm saying since the colonial time of the city, has completely disregarded the natural environment and the Koli inhabitants, like our community, who knew how to manage the land, sea, water, mangroves, etc., through the means of their livelihood, first, the means of our occupation, that got completely disregarded, and rampant urbanization took place in the city. So, as matter of factly, the climate crisis that we see, and most of the city does not understand, like people who are not part of the community or who does not understand the change in water or the fisheries. Holy community, since we have been managing and working with these water, we know if there is any slightest change in the water, what its impact will be. But other citizens, they don't know. But what they see as an impact of climate change in the city is these changing patterns of monsoon. There's like heavy wet spells, heavy dry spells in the city. Then all of a sudden we are experiencing heat wave in the city. Then also, which was the most uncommon thing, is the cyclones that we have been like experiencing since past couple of years now. That is also due to the rising temperatures of the sea around the city. So like Bombay, which has like millions of population, almost 19 to 20 million of us, they definitely experience this sort of climate change, and like the climate crisis that we are talking about, like these timely event which completely devastate the city. But on the other hand, we have community, the indigenous community, who has been like working with waters, who knows that if a monsoon pattern changes, what will change in the sea, what will happen to the coast. And this is what we should be addressed, that the knowledge that the community has and the local fisherman has about the mangroves, the rivers, the estuary, and the sea. That is something I think we should be looking into when we talk about like climate change, because then the community at that, taking that knowledge, does some small initiative at their capacity to actually kind of bring back their livelihood as well.
Right. That makes sense. And I feel that the next prompt that we have kind of speaks about what could be done, what are some measures that the community is already taking, and based on the fact that they've been experiencing this for a while now. So I guess we can, like, the next question would be, can you maybe describe one effort, locally led effort towards adaptation or community capacity building that you've probably led or participated or observed? It could be, one project or a movement or a best practice that maybe you've seen, which has been significant in combating whatever you all have described just before this. Maybe we could start with, I don't know, maybe we could start with Ganesh, then move on to Larson, then Samita, Stalin, and then Vikas.
Thanks, Anushka. I think last 5 years or 6 years, what is happening to fishing is directly related to climate change. The rise in temperature, the change in currents, and just mention about the change in the monsoon pattern. This all affects the entire southwest basin on the southwest Arabian Sea, and at the same time, it's happening in the Bay of Bengal also. So what we've been trying to do is actually adapt different fishing practices which can be more sustainable. I'm also part of that complex system, where I get a blame. You being a commercial fisherman, you are catching a lot of fish. So I get that lot of things about overfishing. At the same time, there are traditional fishermen who are fighting with the overpollution and what is happening at the coastal level. So we've been directly engaged with the community and the government with the policy level also to create a balanced kind of a conservation policy which can help the both. But it's not going to happen only by taking a community approach. So last 4 or 5 years, my work in fact has been engaging with a lot of chefs, with restaurants, with the catering schools, the hotel management schools, and all to create a moment of a local seafood. We have so much of seafood available within our country, but it's saddening that we don't consume, and most of the seafood it goes for export or the other states. So I think that is a major problem, which economically is not good for a fishing community, because after all, fishing is also an occupation. It's like a business. If there is a no profit, then what's the point of doing it? Of course, like 4 5 decades before, it was a whole sustainable concept of catching it for the family, consuming for the family, and whatever was the access, you do it for the bargain, barter system. But that has changed. Even a fisherman has a life, he has an ambition. So I think more and more the knowledge has to be shared. What somebody just mentioned, what knowledge fishermen have, what seasonability knowledge fishermen have, that has to be given to the consumer end also. That has to be given to the market also, so that the season and the patterns are created for at a consumer level, so that we get a more value for what we are catching, rather than just catching the over quantity and selling it for nothing. We catch limited species, get good money, and keep the occupation going. Because what you see in Bombay, what is happening, all of you must have been to fish markets. The average age of a fisherwoman selling fish is above 50. You don't get a younger fisherwoman selling fish, because there is no infrastructure, there are no good healthy conditions. Same way, if you go visit at the harbors in Sasundog or Ferry Wharf, you will see outsiders selling fish. You won't see a direct youth or want to get into this occupation. So the policy level, the movement has to be from the government, wherein small projects like adopting a villages, trying it there, and then taking it to different, instead of a holistic approach of just bringing in the law and just pushing everyone out of the occupation. It's not going to work. If you really want to make a change, it has to be a small pilot projects and scale it to a larger one, rather than just making a policies on the paper and not implementing it. So that's what I've been trying to do last 4 5 years, Anushka, to be very frank.
So, can you elaborate on these pilot projects? Just a very brief elaboration of what you think would work.
So, say for example, last 4 years we've been talking about the fisherman issue of catching small fishes, like juvenile reely fishes, which in fact is a problem for a fishing industry. So we've been creating awareness not to catch those species, and at the government level, we are trying government to make a policies wherein we stop these species being caught, and at the same time at the consumer level, trying to engage consumer to eat more varieties, not rather than just stick what is being served in a restaurant like basas and a salpon, which are imported from 20,000 kilometers away from Bombay. It doesn't make sense. There is so much of seafood available in Mumbai, and there is no local consumption. So that is what the concept and the pilot projects what we've been trying to engage is, and also the season. Somebody mentioned about the seasonality also. People need to understand the way vegetables and fruit markets work. You only eat strawberries in winters, and I always keep saying this: mangoes in summer. Similarly, there are fish patterns also. You eat Bombay duck in monsoon, mackerels in winters, and similar fashion there is. So that adaptation has to come into the larger audience also in the consumer level, not only in the community. So this all patterns, if understood on a larger scale, we can adapt to the climate, and the occupation can sustain. Yeah.
Right. It makes sense. Like, especially the point that you brought in about consumer awareness, and just like if you manage the demand, I think the other end of it would get managed itself.
Absolutely.
And and I guess it would also inform policy in a way where if you were to inform this is what happens during these seasons, you get programs and policies and laws that are directed towards that rather than something else. Moving
and
on.
one just want to add one more thing. There are so many cooperative societies in and around Mumbai and state also, and some are led by a very large fishing groups also. So we've been trying to connect those engaged societies with directly to the fisherwoman also. Especially in my village, what I'm trying to do, we are coming up with a new harbour. So we are trying to engage how the fisherwoman also becomes equally part of these larger movements or a larger change in fishing industry also, so that they equally benefit. So that is another. It's a challenge basically, because with such a generation gap, and no younger community coming back to fishing industry, obviously, because a lot of people think fishing is not a respectable occupation. So I think that is a major challenge what we are trying to do, to make fishing as a respectable occupation in Mumbai and around India. So I think that is the biggest challenge what we are facing right now.
Right. Very interesting.
Yeah.
But moving on, Larson, do you have something to add with respect to what you've seen in Dharavi Koriwada or? anything, any practice that you could talk about, maybe?
Talking about locally led adaptation, what it means to me is how do you preserve a thing which you already have since generations? So again, talking about the ponds, for example. So how do you preserve the ponds from not getting flooded or from not getting hampered by any other climatic change? So I have visited this Viti River with my cousin who goes for fishing over there, and I have seen him, setting up higher pond dikes and also netting them with the fence, netting them and fencing them for the low elevated ponds, and not only this, but there are also been, uh, you know, pumping out of groundwater, and then uh, there are there are at some instances there have been rainwater harvesting also been done by these people. Like I have seen my cousin doing that. So yes, all these things are there, which you know these holy folks are doing to preserve, or to rather say that they are locally adapting this situation.
Right. So you're saying that in Dharavi, Koyawada, especially, that people are already doing this in the meeting. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, yes, they are already doing that because I have seen personally, and I have also interviewed like my cousins itself. So they have told me about how in like few years back the ponds were on a low elevated portion, but then because of the floods and the other things after the 2005 flood basically, so they have started forming, uplifting the this pond dike with the dikes and making the barrier so that the saline water does not hamper the fresh water. So all these things are seen to be carried out so that eventually it does not hamper the aquaculture.
Right. Okay. So maybe if you don't have anything to add, we could move on to Samidha, and Samidha, you could talk about infrastructure and what you've observed, and if there are any practices that you've seen.
Yeah, thank you, Anushka. So infrastructure-wise, I would like to kind of just throw a few concepts that have been going around, especially especially with respect to coastal cities who have like water around it, and what can be done with this water, because developing with water is something that most of the cities are, it was not in the practice of urbanization of these cities, like we can see in India itself, like we have so many coastal cities. So very recently, one locally led adaptation practice, which I would slightly talk it from the government side. An example is we were working in Kochi, and Kochi, just like Bombay, is also a city where it's completely surrounded water. Canals run through the city, and flooding is also an aspect which, in some portions of the city, has been observed due to certain, like, wet spells, like massive wet spells. So during that time, we were trying to formulate a project that will help the city with to develop with its water, and not neglect the water or develop on water, but with its water. And there we did this massive participatory exercise where we tried to understand the concerns of the citizens of the city. It was like at a city level, and through which we immediately understood that water is their main concern, and every other problem is related to water, like waste management and housing, etc. Through which then with the city government we try to work on one canal and of the city, and we try to kind of get as much information as possible from the residents and the users of this canal precinct, and try to understand like what are the possible ways that we can save, get back this canal back to its, no, at least revive it in a particular way, not completely as it was in the past, but at least at some level, how can we revive the canal? Because it sits at a very tension point. And then with government and people and the practitioners like us, architects, urbanists, urban planners like us, environmental engineers as well, we try to formulate a project which now in today's context, a lot of people it has been addressed as nature-based solution as a concept, where you develop development solutions that respect the nature around you, or blue green infrastructure development. Basically, it means that blue is the water and green is the greenscape, the trees, the plants, etc., all the green ecosystem of any given space. So the focus point was, how can we develop an urban space keeping respecting all these elements, because this urban space at one point had these elements, but we we built on it, and we destroyed those elements. So how can we actually develop a city, even if it is a small project? How can it happen with, respecting all these the ecological elements of that particular precinct? So that was a project. And we know, like in Kochi, the government was talking about making it as a sponge city, which means that you have parcels in the city which actually kind of hold the water that comes during monsoon time. As you'll see, there is constant high tide and heavy waves during the monsoon time due to the wind, and hence the water can't go anywhere. It will stay in the city itself or any land space itself. So how can we actually create holding ponds for this water? So that was one project that we did. And what I see is that like coastal cities like Bombay also has the capacity. And when we were formulating this project, this infrastructure project, we actually were talking to people and trying to understand how they used, what is the knowledge they have, the traditional or the indigenous knowledge they have about their waters and lands and mangroves. So in our city, in Bombay, if we bring back the focus there, we have a community, a strong community who knows its waters, who knows its land. So, and there is a greater possibility of actually even developing any urban project, respecting the nature, respecting the blue, respecting the green environment as well. Coastal road project is a project, and all of us, we of course, like most of us who inhabit along the coast of Bombay, knows that this project is going to cost a tremendous amount of like financial issues or even socioeconomic issues to the city. But now the point was, the government had an opportunity to take this urban project and design it in a manner so that it respects the water, the coast, which amazingly falls in the coastal regulation zone. But for this project, the coastal regulation zone was also the rules and regulations were also been relaxed for this project. So we are like, okay, you relax it, but then design it in a manner that no community gets displaced. There are no like displacement of livelihood that happens, no displacement of human life that happens around the coast, like how all those aspects, even displacement of the nature itself. That should also, we should be considering that as a point, displacement of nature. So that should also not have happened. And we live in a century where we can design and actually implement something that is an infrastructure that basically respects both. It's a
Right.
concrete infrastructure, but also respects the nature. Yeah.
Right. So maybe we could, like, later on, if you have time, you can highlight the public participatory aspect of this project that you were mentioning. But
Sure.
right now, let's move on to what Stalin has to say. Stalin, you have your thoughts and your projects, because you've led so many of them, especially with respect to wetlands and with forests, and in the Mumbai metropolitan region. So yeah.
Our work is basically it's directed towards empowering the local communities, the coastal communities. If you see, when you talk about a fisherman, the one who gets some kind of a compensation, some kind of a negotiation spot or a spot at the table of negotiation is the one who's got a boat. What about those artisan fishermen who take a net and go to the creeks and fish for their own families, for their small livelihoods, for the women who go crab hunting, for the ones who gathering shells and oysters? They have absolutely no recognition anywhere in this entire process. They are continuously sidelined. And what is worse is that cities are parasites. Like Mumbai, if you look at the mangroves of Mumbai, there is an estimated 10,000 tons of garbage which is lying inside the mangroves there. You need to retrieve that. We are doing our best. Every month we have two cleanups which is directed at removing the trash from the mangroves because it's completely covering the soil and completely covering the root zone of the mangroves. The crab finding of a crab has become very difficult for the communities. So we started this cleanups after which we have started to get more and more cleaner areas for the fishermen, so they get more crab hunters, they get a better benefit. The mangroves themselves are beginning to thrive. That's one part of it. Now the question is, every time you go and clean the mangrove, when you come back after a month, it is the same state. So we decided it's not going to help us. We do not want to create Guinness Book of World Records of cleaning mangroves. We much rather stop the problem at the source itself. So we requested the government to install the nets in every stormwater drain so that the plastic trash does not, or non-degradable trash does not reach the mangroves. They resisted us for almost 7 years. We took them to court, and finally, after more than 6 years of battling in the court also has ordered that these nets have to be put in place. And now the corporation has decided to do it. So by one way, we are stopping the problem from recurring again and again, and secondly, we are cleaning up the mangroves on the other hand. So you are doing damage control and prevention both. Now, when you come, we are more interested in protecting the wetlands for the avifauna, for the biodiversity associated with it, for which we help. We are fighting battles. In fact, it is our petition in the Honorable High Court which resulted in the term wetlands coming into the government dictionaries. The wetland, this word was absent. It was always called wasteland. So we managed to do that, and there are court-specific orders from the Honorable High Court of Bombay which prevents any kind of reclamation, dumping, construction on wetlands. So we have empowered entire communities and citizens to protect the wetlands around them. And this is a long battle. And then the government decided that too many wetlands were getting protected, so they altered the rules. They changed the wetland rules. We challenge the rules now. That is gone into the Supreme Court. So it's a multi-pronged battle which we are fighting on all fronts. But our focus is very clear because we believe that poverty, the cause of poverty, is a denial of access to environmental resources to communities that need it the most. You are taking them away and pushing them into poverty. You're denying them access, or you're destroying whatever is there worthwhile for them to survive. So the marginalized sections, the ones who don't have a voice, we are their voice. We help them fight their battles. We also help with ground restoration where degraded areas. We don't believe per se mangrove plantation. We think it's a very wrong idea. It's a bad idea because mangroves are something which are not like terrestrial vegetation. They grow on their own wherever the conditions are perfectly fertile. So we should not go and populate areas which don't have mangroves, but those areas which have lost mangroves in the past, we help and restore those areas. So that way, we have a multi-faceted approach to this entire issue. And best part is that the communities are happy to work with us. In fact, there's a very specific example I would like to give is there was a village in Palghar which was getting submerged with every high tide. And they were for years asking for a preventive fund to be made outside their village so that the water doesn't enter their homes. And for years, nothing happened. And finally, we helped them file the case. We fought it for them, and they got the thing done. So we have helped them resist the effects of sea level rise. So otherwise, they would have to move completely from that area. We are trying to prevent this migration due to climate change refugees. We're trying to help them build their own resilience to it and enhance whatever natural resilience is available around it. Because we believe that nature is not just a destroyer, it's a great provider too. Where there is a problem, there is a solution also. Now, what we have done, we have spoken about a very disastrous project like the coastal road. On one hand, the climate change action plan for Mumbai recognizes sea level rise, and are the same people go and reclaim the coastline and cause more damage to the shore and puts the city at peril. So here there is a lot of disconnect between what is said and what is being done, and we highlight those issues also. So we are basically hands-on and fighting every possible battle in the best way possible.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
That's very interesting. And then we can maybe explore this later in the next prompt also. But right now, Vikas, earlier you were mentioning something related to sanitation and when you were introducing yourself. So
Yeah,
maybe discuss that.
Stalin, you want to say something?
no. I lost the sound in between. I thought I wasn't audible. Sorry. Please continue. Yeah.
So instead of sanitation, I would like to take 2 points from here. One is what Ganesh has said about different species. Now the different species we have, which we have habit of eating different fish in different season. Now we want local fishermen have different types of eating habits in a like seasonal fish, as Ganesh had mentioned. So I believe that what we are doing in Warsaw, that we have started home chef and Kolivada walks, and certain this kind of system where different types of consumer come. So I'll just tell you some example of one of lot of friends of mine when they come to the Warsaw part. So they said, "अरे ये बॉम्बे का पार्ट है लगता ही नहीं ऐसा इतना शांति है," and all that. They get amazed because they come from a different cities and they have migrated over here. Maybe their ancestors have come 100 years ago here, and they never been to the different villages of what Mumbai has. And when we have started exploring Kolivada walks and eat at local fisherman's house, kind of. So generally, you go to the Gomantak or a Malamni, this Malvan seafoods and all, you probably get 6 to 8 types of species, which generally pomfret, mangada, bombil, all these you get. But people are not aware about the other species like ribbon fish or squid. Squid generally eats in the 5 stars and all, but there are other fish like rani, masa and all, which generally comes. So we eat those fish in our houses. So we have started educating or giving that into their daily meals by the local fisherwomen. They are cooking at their home, and then after Kolivada walk or a ride from the boat to the Killeshwar temple, and they can come to the village and they can have lunch at the local fishermen. So community is getting involved, and other species which somewhere only local fishermen or local communities are aware. We are trying to penetrate of the thought of having these kind of a species also. So as Ganesh Nakwa said, if fishing sustains, then only the village sustains and the community sustains, kind of. So these kind of a fish, maybe oysters and tisra and all that, which people are not majorly aware. People are aware about the prawns and this stuff. So we are through our meal system. So we have something called Poli Baba, which is we have recently started our prawns pickle and the tuna pickle that is there. But apart from that, we are now discovering mackerel nachos, kind of. So this is local led. Women are getting involved in this, and they are preparing this kind of stuff where other species we can involve in making different products, like a modern products, not the traditional one where people can easily consume those. So we are making something like a bombil sticks, which is just from the what you call it, the bone, middle bone of the bombil, bombida, and people are consuming that. So these small ideas or items we are putting into their meals, side meals, like if you order the koli thali, so we are adding those, and they are happily eating. So people are getting involved in this. This is what I want to talk about the Ganesh's point of view of extending the idea of other fishes like a seasonal fishes. So seasonal fishing, and about the Stalin, what he has said about fixing the net in terms of, so generally we forget one thing, that coolies around the coastal areas, is a major force available. So 40, 45 years down the line, people used to throw bycatch. They never used to, bring at the shore because it used to be heavy and all. Now you see the bycatch has been replaced by the plastic in the net. They get a lot of plastic in the net while, trawling or a dole net. And so we have started educating fishermen, and we wanted to now subsidize. We are working on a model where fishermen can get plastic from the high seas or mangroves areas. Now, generally, people used to go to fish. Now we are trying to the smaller boat owners or smaller fishers to go to the mangroves, get the plastic out of there, and we can have some model which can be utilized for making pavers, making chairs, and there are enormous other ideas where plastics can be utilized. But we are now currently discovering this. We are, talking to the fishermen. So if that model can be, self-sustainable, so I think removal of plastic in a subsidized manner could, work it out. This we have tried pilot one project during first lockdown, before the first lockdown, and some 10 boats were doing with us, and they were getting some plastic whatever coming. So generally what happens in the fishing time, if you get the plastic in the net, they are throwing again into the water. But what we are educating that if they can bring, I know it's very small stuff, but I think it's majorly do. If you see GPGP, great plastic garbage patch in Pacific, it is increasing because it has been slowly gone to the seas. It has been increased. So somehow, if we can educate this force about bringing plastic on the shore with some subsidized model, so
Right.
we are trying our level best to educate the fisher folk, which is largely available on the every coast of India or other world, and they can bring some, this plastic from the sea, and we could able to develop some sort of a model out. Thank you.
Right. So what do you think is the scale of maybe scaling these projects up, and why do you think there's this disjuncture between like the best way, rather than addressing it as a disjuncture, let's talk about what's the best way to gap this the what is happening with policies and programs and what's happening in governance as opposed to what's happening on ground, and what do you think would be a very good way, one strategy that would help scale it up, collaborate with larger institutions to make this possible on a larger scale? Do you think it has potential of that there's potential of that happening, or is this something that will only always happen at the local scale? Because maybe you could only start
Okay.
and
So this is, I think, your third point also, which you are
yeah,
talking about. So I personally feel, there is a huge gap between what the policies are being, made, or it has been never, or rather, very few people generally being part of the government discussions. And so I'll tell you one example about the mangroves park, which has been VPT is making or planning around Kolaba. It has been never, locally fishermen, if you take to the local fishermen and ask him to go to the mangroves in the boat, he can easily find the way and he'll come out. But if you tell the government officer to go to the mangroves, I think he can go to the mangroves on the paper, but he will not go exactly to that part. So I think what personally I believe is, traditional fishermen, local authority, local people who are aware about so much, or they consume a lot of knowledge about, their particular area since ages. So that needs to be, collaborate, that needs to be documented, that needs to be utilized for the betterment of the community and the whatever infrastructure projects are coming. So we are not against the development of it, but somehow I personally feel that these people needs to be be a part. So how you can be a part of it? So I am working on the project or something called Fishermen Chamber of Commerce, where I feel that as Stalin rightly said, and I am very happy that this point has been came on this particular platform, that it has been always compensated to the boat owners. But what about the people who are dependent on the other on their vending or vendors, sailors, the oyster, this thing, the people who goes to the picking up certain items which is available near areas. In mangroves, people go for the crabs, so they don't have any identity as such, because the boat has identity, they get compensated. I think very first thing which maybe Stalin also agree that New Bombay airport which is coming, and there are a lot of fishermen never got anything. So those who had owning the lands, they got everything. But a fisherman or a fisher folk around those villages, around I think 650 families are there, who has never got anything, any compensation. So I think there is no single platform available for the fishermen or fisher folk community. So I personally feel that fisherman chamber of commerce should fill that gap, and people has to come over here to talk. Let's say like there are Maratha commerce chambers, there are Bombay commerce chambers, there are Maharashtra commerce chambers, and so on, FICCI and DICCI and all. So people are aware about what is happening about GST, what is happening something. So people are I feel that very few people are aware about the climate change report, because they don't have any platform until and unless certain some sanstha, until unless they educates them. Government don't have any marketing plan for educating the fishermen, irrespective of their yojana schemes and whatever they have. They don't even educate on those. So I personally feel that fishermen chamber of commerce could fill that gap in all this information, this kind of a program. And thank you that you have invited me for this. So this kind of a program needs to be widely accepted on this fishermen chamber of kind of a platform, where I think a lot of policies can be made, a lot of discussions can happen, a lot of ideas can be generated over a period of time, and I think it will go to the community, and I think authorities can fantastically work with this kind of a knowledge which community possesses.
Okay. So, Ganesh, do you think that, as what he said, he's talking about creating a mediation channel? What do you think about that?
I think it's more, I mean, there are policies, both national and international. But I think that they are not reaching the fishermen. That is absolutely right. But I also take the blame. What I said at the early part of the discussion, that there is already an organized structure of all these fisheries cooperative societies in every part of the state. Not only in Maharashtra, but every coastal state and union territories also. I think there is a lack of communication because the key stakeholders, what you say, what Shalin has been saying, the boat owners are actively involved. Simple reason, because they are fishing. At the same time, there are artisanal fishermen who are also actively engaged on the coast, but they are not connected to the government officers or the policies or the decision makers, because they don't have that access. So I think that is what the societies has to play a key role. And at the same time, if you learn about the councils, especially in the fishing, not only the policies and the regulation help, there has to be a council as per the geography of the state or the locations. In India, we have policies which are like made for the huge areas. Like Maharashtra has a separate policy, and entire coast, west coast and the east coast, has only one policy and a one regulation. It will never work like that. There has to be a regional council as per the geography of the ocean. Like in Arabian Sea, we could have like three councils. One is northern Arabian coast, wherein Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Goa can be part. There can be a central council. There can be a south council, and the different geologicals can have a different, so that the more access can happen. What we're talking about, the stock assessment, overfishing. I would like to add what I missed in the early part. If you see the fisheries in India, the numbers are going so bad, but all these national policies or the bodies, they keep on fluctuating the number and saying, no, our healthy fisheries is a healthy. They just show the numbers, but nobody has done a real stock assessment of the size of the fisheries. What fishes has been caught? What are the healthy fishes has been caught? What are the low value species has been caught? If you seriously take these numbers, and there are so many scientists and everybody working on this, but they never highlight this, it's really bad. I as per me, I'm studying like whatever is available on the CMFRI or the other website. 45% fisheries is seeing a reduction. What I'm trying to say is, what Bombay used to get, pomfret, Bombay duck, and these all high value species in 80s and 70s is not available anymore. Or let's say the seerfish, or if you go further south, there are Malabar travelis, or all these species are slowly becoming smaller, and they are not available or accessible to fishermen. This itself says that last 10-15 years, the climate has played a key role on the migration and the size of the species, and no one is talking about it. If the quantity is increasing, that is been increased by other species which are being migrated in our waters, which are being favorable waters for them. Species like Odogus niger. I know it's a complex topic to talk about here, but it's a serious climate issue. That species has overtaken the Indian production 30% of the catch. and nobody's talking about it. And that is the gap. I mean, what our question is, the national and the global policies, how to bridge this gap by taking expertise from the fishermen, from the actual stakeholders, like fishermen, not only fishermen, but the supply chain, the exporters, everybody. Then the policy can be helpful and adaptable, or else it will never work.
Makes sense. Samantha, do you want to add to this? I also saw Celine's question, which says, can you tell us more about how fishing communities organize and what is their main mandate? So, in case like the next few participants, if when y'all are talking, y'all could be also address that question. In case y'all know anything, or we can address it later.
Yeah.
You're on mute, Samantha.
Sorry, thank you. With respect to bridging the gap, as all the panelists and I think we are talking the same, is that the local community, the fishing community of Bombay, the coolies, we have the knowledge, we have this traditional knowledge which has been passed down to our ancestors for centuries together, and we know how these waters function and what has been changing in the waters due to change in the climate. Because every day people from our community go in the water and they report through their observation and experience. Now, the thing is that always it happens at policy level or any development project level, the information never gets translated. And here is where, as you also earlier asked Anushka to talk about participatory planning, people's participation in policy formation or people's participation in any urban development project, it is crucial to kind of have bodies in between. Like we at Urbz do that. Like we try to bridge this gap by directly talking to people on one-on-one basis, reporting how they are using their areas, what are the small scale initiatives they are taking to make their areas better, and then try and take this information and then tell the government that okay, this is what is happening within your constituency, this is what is happening. So the participation by the people in formulating policies, participation by the people in formulating any urban planning, urban development, or urban design project for that matter, is quite it's quite crucial. Like we in just like a couple of months ago, we were trying to do this small study, where we were trying to understand what are the small initiatives that the coolies have taken in different kolivadas as a matter as a point to adapt, or for one, mitigation, second, adaptation. What are the small scale projects that they are taking? They are basically initiatives that they are taking to work with the climate that is changing around them, work with the waters that is changing around them. And that's when we understood that the ponds that are the fishing ponds that have been developed in the mangroves, which is within the creek, Dharavi Creek, those ponds are basically sitting right in the near the mouth of the river, where the river is completely polluted throughout its length, and here you can get like an ecosystem which is managed by the coolies from the kolivada, and the ponds have been like regularly cleaned by whoever is owning that particular pond. The bund walls have been developed by the coolie with their hands, so all done manually. And then they are trying to kind of revive the mangroves, because they keep cleaning the plastic that gets collected trapped in those mangroves, so they try to remove that, plus keep cleaning the bed of the ponds, the riverbed, the creek bed of the pond, so that the siltation, whatever pollutants come and settle on the bed, they clean it, and your fish can go and breed there. So these are the practices where which needs to be informed to the government. It's awareness creation at a community level, what everyone talks about, but we should also address that there is awareness creation needed at the government level. So all these small scale projects needs to be informed to the government before they even do any sort of urban project. Like in Dharavi, near that where the pond area is, we have a metro station coming up, which is underground. Now, immediately when they started digging for this metro station underground, they started drilling, they started piling the land, etc. And immediately the effect was being felt, because this is like proximity of 50 meters or less rather. So immediately the repercussion was felt within the ponds, where the fish started again changing their pattern of laying eggs, or the kind of fish that it started coming. So it's like informing the government that this is what is happening, and you take that element and then you design something, or then you design a policy that supports the people their actions, rather than just completely disregarding what people are doing. And hence I think participatory planning and participatory designing or co-designing is a way forward in this.
Right. It's very interesting. So, Larson, do you have something really to add to this? Because she was talking about the Dharavi Koiwada case.
Yes, most of it actually good points are been covered by Samida and Ganesh, and I am in consent with them. So what I would like to talk about is there are some kind of policies. There have always been some kind of policies, but what about the implementation and execution? That is where we lack. That is where the government also lacks, and that is where the community also lacks. So what is the solution? Basically, the solution is both the communities and the government should come together, should collaborate. And actually, the government should suo moto take the stance itself and should form a body or set up a body. You can say like a climate risk management body. This is just an example. So that, and also not only by forming this body, what the government and the community can do is the government can see through it that there are quarterly reports being made on the what kind of actions are being taken by forming such a kind of a body. So all these things can be taken, and not only this. Actually, after making such a body or after as there are some policies already policies, so these officers or whoever it is, they should be made accountable, because nobody is making anybody accountable for what they are not doing. So this is my primemost point, that should be a mechanism. There should be a separate mechanism, basically, by how they, if they are made accountable, then they do their work properly and execute and implement whatever the policies and projects are there for the communities. And from an international point of view, I think that one should mobilize international funding, like for locally led adaptation, basically. So as we are talking about locally led adaptation, so there should be a international funding coming out from internationally. Then we can also raise some uh, our ambitions, the community ambitions, what the community wants, and then we can improvise. So all these things should be taken, and we should team up. And all these things should be done on the grassroots level. We should start on the grassroots level. And mainly, I would say that execution and implementation is the most important thing which we are lacking of. Otherwise, we being the community, we can definitely do good for our own betterment.
Right. And Stalin, as somebody who's been working so closely with the grassroots and been working in conjunction with policies, laws, and the grassroots, what are your thoughts? What do you think is the gap, and why do you think it exists? And is there a way we could probably bridge it? Is there a possibility of collaboration?
The problem lies with governance. If you look at the pattern of governance, the pattern of policy making, while we are correctly saying that the fishermen are being hit and they are affected by projects, let's for a moment keep that aside. Does the government even talk to the urban folks on what they want? No. You are always given a project, you take it or leave it. This is coming your way. The same happens with the fishermen also. There is no stakeholder engagement even in the planning process,
Right,
nor
right.
nor in the execution process. I filed an RTI with the Chief Minister's office, and I wanted to know, this is with the earlier government, that I wanted to know who are the scientific advisors who are approving your projects or whom you are consulting on those projects. Because we found that we were increasingly engaging the government in the courts to try and prevent some damage. So the question naturally came to me is, which scientist has approved this? Where is the science in this? So I asked this question under RTI and I got the reply that no such post exists. So the scientists are never involved in any of these processes. It is only when NGOs take them to court or the communities take them to court that someone is brought in to hide what wrongs have been done, to try and show something else, some mitigation measures, etc., etc. Loss of marine biodiversity is a serious cause of concern. We have lost more than 80% of our freshwater biodiversity. And marine bio in the saline zone, it's getting worse by the day. We were talking about the loss of species, which is very important. When we talk of climate change and loss of species, these are alarm bells which should ring very loudly. The Ramsar, it's a proposed Ramsar site, the Thane Creek. To come and see the state of the Thane Creek, we'll be happy to take you around. There's hardly any fish left in a Ramsar site. It's really sad to see that. The number of species that have gone extinct, the marine mammals which have gone extinct, the tetrapods, the reptiles, all of it. The biodiversity is completely hammered as far as the MMR region goes. Now, if you talk of tackling this, you'll find that there is funding. Now, see, there is a hypocrisy in the CSR funding also. Now, when you say we want to do a certain activity to clean a particular area, you will get that funds. But if you say you want to stop the government from polluting that area, there is no funds coming. I'll give you an example, the Ulhas River case. It's a river which was being polluted by 4 municipal corporations, and these corporations were sending raw sewage into drinking water. How criminal can that be? We have been fighting it for almost 8 years now. And the court fined the government 100 crores for doing it. It's a historical judgment. 100 crores they paid up also. That the government cannot pollute a river. But the fact is that this long battle, who funds us? Where do you get the money? Why is the CSR initiative not coming forward? It is not a personal battle, na? What is better? You keep doing cleanups endlessly, or you stop the cleanup from happening because there is no source of pollution coming in. So you have to fund the right things, na? The moment you take a stand on something, it is seen as confrontational. There is no confrontation here. It's a dialogue. The government doesn't talk to you. You will have to raise your voice and tell them, please listen to us. And that's all what we do. Or people like the other panelists also, they're trying to do. We are not really, able to connect with the government, and that is the problem. We speak of awareness, and the last panelist very correctly said that the awareness, when we talk of awareness, people are generally aware. It is the amount of environmental illiteracy in the entire government machinery that is shocking. You will find they have absolutely no connect with the environment. I'm telling this with all respect. I'm not trying to insult them, but even a 10th standard student or a 7th standard student in a school knows more than these officials about the environment. It is that bad. So where do you start? Where do you start? Now, when you have anywhere, there should be a process of having an environment officer in every district. We've been asking for this. Every district should have an environment officer, someone who has the power to intervene, someone who has the power to give suggestions to the government. You don't want to talk to people, fine, you keep your own officers, people will interact with them. So this lack of dialogue, lack of willingness to take people on board in all your projects is the root cause of all these issues. Now, nobody would have stopped the coastal road if you had engaged with the community earlier, if you had demonstrated that you were taking care of the corals earlier, if you could have demonstrated that, okay, this is very urgent and you have to do it. There were ways to do it. There are ways to do each and every project in this country, in this state. But the question is, are you willing to listen and do that? It's just that my way or you just go away. So that attitude from the government is creating all the problem. The lack of dialogue is creating the problem. Thank you.
Yeah. So we have a lot of questions that have come in the while that we were talking. So instead of let's just address some of them. Celine had asked earlier, can you tell us more about fishing communities, how fishing communities organize, and what is their main mandate? So anybody in the panel who wants to take that question?
No, the problem, yeah, I'll take that for I'll give a quick answer. The problem with the fishing community is that they are not organized. Every fishing community is divided, and even on a single district, you won't find that. You will find that there are hundreds of fishermen's organizations, but none of them are coming together on a common platform and speaking, what you call it, the scientific and the legal facts. They are all mostly on emotion. Most of them are on emotion, and rightly so. They are emotional people, so they express them in that way. They are hurt, no doubt. The lack of a cohesive leadership in the fishing community is their bane. They need to work around it and get it organized. You just take up that directly. You go to every Kolivada, there will be 4 or 5 organizations there. Okay, but who's representing the real interest of the fishermen? That is as far as the fishermen's community go. In the government CRZ meetings, you find tell me how many fishing communities are represented there. Who's talking on behalf of the fishermen? Nobody.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. There's another question with respect to the whole idea of our panel, which is by Shail Pajaria. And it says, while I completely agree with the richness of the local traditional knowledge systems and the relationships communities form with the land and sea, I also understand that these are based on patterns and rhythms set over a long period of time. With just how quickly and abruptly these patterns are shifting with climate change and rapid urbanization, how do we think that the role of indigenous knowledge in adapting? How do we think about the role of indigenous knowledge in adaptation today, and how do we bridge this gap? I feel some of it has been already answered, but anybody who wants to answer the rest of the question can take it. Maybe Samidha or Ganesh or Vikas.
I can take it, and maybe Ganesh and other panelists can also add. So when we talk about indigenous knowledge system, we also see that like we have a common understanding that if the water comes back, it's going to come back with the natural course it had before it was been like completely disrupted. So with respect to that, the local knowledge system is about working, and it's not like it's a knowledge system that was like maybe like developed thousands of years ago. The system also among the community has like this information and knowledge among the community has also kept adapting and then changing as per the lands and the waters have kept changing. It's not that we were like 1,000 years ago in one scenario and then boom, we are in 2022 in another scenario. There has been like transition of change in the land, sea, fisheries, coastal life, in habitats as well, and the way cities function. So all this happened, and the community has like also adapted, learned, and then practiced different set of fishing, and also like the way they thrive along the coastal belt. So with respect to that, when we say that when like I'll go back to my point, like when we say that we have to work and work with the water, it's like there are people and communities who know how to work with water, and they have been doing that for past so many like years and decades and centuries. So hence we work with these communities, and Kohli community being one of them, and the most urbanized city of Bombay can work with them to kind of understand how we can develop or build climate resilient infrastructure with the knowledge that this community have. Like going back to the option of ponds, like the example of ponds, it was a complete hyper urbanized area, but the Kolis from Dharavi Koliwada, they started developing these ponds because other means of livelihood was scarce. Like, and hence some of the families who only knew how to do fishing, they started developing these ponds and then managing the mangroves. They know that they have to keep the mangroves clean, although the waste is coming from different parts of the neighborhoods and the city from through the Methi River. They still try to keep cleaning these mangroves and let them proliferate, but in a controlled manner, as how it would have been. The creek was not like that. The creek had like sand beds along it, like few like decades ago. So it has changed very recently. So that's how like the knowledge can be used to kind of develop. Although when we say that we don't completely disregard the experts, we of course say that the environmental engineers, the environmental experts, they also have a lot of information and knowledge, and it's essentially like having a discourse and discussion amongst all these stakeholders together when we say that we should be developing something that is climate resilient, you know.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. And there's one more question which says, will collaborating with the government create an impact, or is it better to function on an organization level to educate the locals? This is by Parth Soman. In case anybody has an answer to that question.
Ganesh can answer that.
No, it has to be an organizational level, to be very frank. I've been trying with the government for past 5 years, and in fact, that is the reason I decided to move away from Bombay, because it's not happening. So I think whatever we have been discussed, it has to be taken at an individual level or an organizational level. The hopes, I have already lost the hopes with the government, to be very frank. And what I would like to also address what Stalin said. It's absolutely correct that the Koli community, the leadership lacks. It's because of so many associations working everywhere, every village, every district. And I think the movement can only happen if all of us come on a one platform, and it's addressed properly. Then the most of the problems what we are just talking about the problems, and hopefully we get a solutions, if not from the government, but it can happen from an organizational level. And I would like to add, there are people doing it. I mean, there are small organization, NGOs. I will name specially like Dakshins is there, and WWF is there, and so many people who are working on the ground, who decided not to work with the government and go on organization level, adopt villages, learn what is the problem, be with the community, engage with the community, and try to obviously bring the other different practices which can sustain the livelihood. After all, if you don't change the approach and keep on continuing what we were doing the thousands years back, it's not going to work, because a lot has changed, and we need those transformation to survive. In fact, I have been traveling last 9 months across the coast of India. What we used to practice in 2005, the fishing method, that's completely gone. A lot of fishing techniques have been changed. People have adapted very smartly, and especially traditional fisher folks in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. It's amazed to see what they have adapted to. That their fishing techniques have changed, and I think that change is not there in Maharashtra. And hopefully, maybe in coming time, because to be very frank, we would like to pass that knowledge, to our community, wherein instead of just talking about the problems, we try ourselves and engage our community in these different practices which are available elsewhere in India itself. So I think it is possible, but not from government level, to be very frank.
Okay. With that, I guess we're at the end of our session. In case anybody has something else that they wanted to add, which they didn't have an opportunity to do. So now we have 2 more minutes before we conclude.
Yeah. I'll just like go back to Celine's question about how the community, organize themselves, or most of the panelists said that, okay, we don't have that common, like common understanding, or we don't come together most often. But there was this one movement where like the fish, like the women from the community, when it came to their livelihood, as opposed, like they basically mobilized and protested quite a lot in front of the government as a collective from different Koliwadas. Koli women came together for one point that their livelihood is of selling fish, and it's something that the community has accepted. Like the men from the community will fish and the women will sell the fish. So women have been like economically always active in our community. So when it came to their livelihood, and in the sense like when their livelihood was hampered and it was in danger, because others started actually coming and also selling fish. At that time, most of the women from different Poliwadas came together, and in this I'm talking about like around some 15 years ago or something, came together and were protesting. There was like massive large scale demonstration that happened. I remember like I was in Mahim Koliwada, and the area near BK Bandra Kurla complex, like the T junction area, women were demonstrating from there in a large, massive group of like thousands, to kind of say that these are our livelihood, and we have to be like forebearer of this livelihood. So that was one such like activity or incident that I can remember on top of my head.
Right. That's really nice to know. There's one more
I
person
just
who's raising their
yeah,
hand. Sorry, Asan,
yeah.
but if you are raising your hand, I think you can unmute yourself and ask your question, because your name shows as my name, so I don't know what to call you.
Hello.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you listening?
Yes, we can hear you.
I would just like to have a few points at this point. It's wonderful you guys are speaking. It's like Stalin, what is he's speaking is really awesome. The few points what he said is was really fantastic. But since I'm working with Urbz for the past 10 years, see, it's not a small time. I'm working with these guys for the past 10 years. I would just like to mention only one thing at this point is that the policymakers are not actually aware of the problems faced by us, means actually coolies. Take care. There are certain times when they are not also least bothered to go on the ground and check up the situation what we guys are facing actually. At last time, when few times back, when I was speaking to one of the fisheries minister who was actually concerned of the entirely Maharashtra, he was totally shocked at to saying me that नहीं मुझे पता नहीं, means a simple word what he said was मुझे पता नहीं, means this shows the minister was not actually aware of the certain problems what we guys actually my community is facing. Only that the Urbz is working for the past 10 years. These guys are going actually up to the grassroots and they are seeing what problems we are facing today when it comes into the rainy seasons, when and there are certain things when we are not actually taking the things very wrongly in the name of development and facility. Look at the situation faced by the community today. Look at the coastal roads going from the coastal side today. If the coastal roads are going just next to the coastal area, where are these small fishing boats supposed to go? Am I right or wrong?
Right.
And there are, I would like to take very simple thing at the end of my discussion is like everybody wants to have the delicacy of the seafood without going into the deep waters. See, these things gets a smile on your face. Even you want to have the delicacy, but you don't have to have the problems to go and see what we are facing it and going into the deep waters.
Right.
Means like today, one of my friends who's talking from Warsaw, I guess it. He was talking from Warsaw. But the small things are not going to make a change. We need a big impact. And then today, when the whole Urbz team, I'm working with them, they know what are the situation, what are the problems. They are working with this. They are doing it. They're trying their level best. Hats off to these guys. For the past 10 years, and since I'm working with them, I know their day-to-day things, what they are doing to change up the whole entire community.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry,
That's
but I'm sorry, but we have to cut you off because
so I have really finished. Thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak up over there. Larson was also good with very good points. Hats off to Larson. He was also good with very good points, and I was very listening to him.
Thank you.
You may proceed. It was wonderful talking to you all guys.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful time for giving me an opportunity.
Yes. So I think that was
Anushka, I just wanted to add something.
Yeah.
I missed on it. Actually, about talking about bridging the gap. One more thing, with the advent of technology, is it not possible even now? We should ask this question to ourselves. We can set up a something kind of a portal kind of a thing, or anything sort of that. So if we use the technology, and if we use the technology rightly, I'm sure we can make changes.
Right.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm just going to conclude really quickly. And I just want to say that everybody's brought in some really interesting and important points that I think can be forwarded and can be thought about. Be it, just stakeholder participation, be it awareness of consumers, policy awareness on the grassroots levels, and just methods of organizing that can possibly be enhanced. So, with that, I think we can just say that based on whatever conversation that we've had, I think it's fair to say that global efforts or even national, regional efforts towards climate change adaptation can genuinely benefit from the inputs of people who are actually feeling it on the ground. It is only through engagement of people who are directly impacted that any policy or program or project can actually be effective. And we have an opportunity right now, especially in Mumbai, to best use indigenous community knowledge of the Koris who've been vanguards of the sea for centuries, and to use this knowledge and experience and combine it with technical science in a manner that can benefit both, especially like something that's organically codependent. And because the changes in climate are, like I said earlier, I don't feel I'm repeating myself, but I've experienced by these people always policies, programs, action plans, projects generated through participation can actually bring these issues down to a pragmatic scale of intervention where something could actually happen. And I believe that we're at this critical juncture where we need to ask ourselves this one question, in Mumbai at least, is how can we harness this historically accumulated environmental knowledge of Mumbai's Kori communities and, indigenous communities all across the world, specifically as it is embodied in their habitats, and convert them into practical tools of engagement with the city's vulnerability to climate change. And having said that, I guess that we can conclude today's session. I'm really thankful for all of you all that have joined us today. I feel that we've gone over time already. And thank you to all the panelists who agreed to come and call for contributing to this discussion. And thank you to all the people who asked questions and engaged. Most of all, we are grateful to ICAD for giving us this opportunity to discuss this issue, something that's so local and so context specific to where we were at a global platform. And I hope that everybody has a good day. So thank you.